Racial prejudice and racism are not the same thing. One is about personal beliefs and dislike. The other is about systematic and institutionalized oppression. Understanding the difference speaks directly to today's question: who can and can't be racist? Let's get started. Good evening and welcome to the Democracy Gauge on SABC 3 and SABC News 404. I'm Bongani Bingwa. Tonight we tackle the issue of racism in our country. Apartheid and colonialism were premised on racism. A structure and system of government was created on the idea that whites were superior and everyone else was inferior, and resources were distributed accordingly. But apartheid is now over, but its effects and structures, are they also gone? Importantly, are the attitudes that underpinned it as a system gone? Adam Katsavelos, Kessinaya, Vicky Momberg, Penny Sparrow, the Clifton Beach sheep incident are just a few examples. So can anyone else be racist? That is our poll question tonight from our topic: can black people specifically be racist? Choose from our three colors. Green is yes, yellow maybe, red is no. You can go to our poll on sabcnews.com and answer our question on Facebook and Twitter, remembering of course to use the hashtag SABCDG25 and SABC News. Now, our reporter Mariska Botha canvassed some views and they're quite interesting. Let's have a look.
There is a racism even with the black people among the white people, maybe because of the history. So we always like watching whatever the white people are doing to us so that we can attack them.
Predominantly comes from, I don't know, from the people that colonized first. I think it's more from their side than it is from anyone else. It's obviously a bit knee-jerk from the other side. I presume it works both ways, but I think predominantly it's from my side of the fence. Not me specifically, but you know, people who are white, basically.
In the Western Cape, it's just it's a culture. We are living in that culture.
Racism is something that's taught. So when people say to him, look, you're a racist because you're white, why? Why must you be a racist because you're white? Black can be racist. The minute that you point out that one color is more superior to another, or one race has better rights than another, I think it's a problem. Were there problems in the past? Hell yes. Were they addressed properly? No.
I think racism can come from all directions. I think a black person is capable of racism because racism is not only directed to one specific race. It's a whole entire thing whereby if you don't like another race, it is a form of racism. So it can't just be biased on white people not liking black people. It's a multi-directional thing.
I think there's racism in Cape Town. I think there's racism in South Africa. I think there's racism in the world. I think that from our past, we've been conditioned on both sides, and we have to unlearn what we learned. We learned bad habits, we learned bad judgments, we learned stereotypes, and we have to learn to take each person as a soul and as a human being, and not to judge each other too harshly. I think that we're a miracle nation. I think that we had a genocide and a Holocaust here, and that people are very, very damaged and very, very hurt.
I don't think one group is only a racist. I believe also all the groups actually need to start. You need to start with yourself as an individual to eradicate the racism, and it's all in the mind.
Well, as you know, it is our boast here on Democracy Gauge that we want to hear from every South African across the spectrum. So not only have we got reports from Mariska, but we're now joined via a WhatsApp voice note by Drikas Vederman, who has an interesting perspective on this because he says he's in fact a reformed racist.
I'm often asked the question whether reverse racism in fact exists. I think for one race to be racist, first of all, they need to have the ability to oppress another race, and also the thought that they are superior to another race, which I've never seen black people think that they are superior to whites. It's something that white people have carried with them for generations, unfortunately. Whether there's such a thing as reverse racism, as far as I'm concerned, that's absolute nonsense. We have reparation, but there's no reverse racism. There's none of the horrible things that apartheid did to black people is done against white people. None of them. If you can draw the analogy to a very abusive father in a family, perhaps, and that father abuses his wife and his children over many decades. If the wife manages to get away from him eventually, and she hates him for what he did to her and the family, is she reverse abusing him? No, I think not. So, in my opinion, no such thing as reverse racism.
All right, that's one view. What is yours? Keep engaging with us on Twitter. Remember to use the hashtag SABCDG25 and hashtag SABC News. Now, for a different perspective on this matter, we're joined from our Durban studios by Professor Ashwin Desai, Professor of Sociology at the University of Johannesburg. Prof, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Let's start off with definitions, right? Please, can you explain the difference between racial prejudice and racism?
Well, I expect these definitions are just too neat to have because we live in the real world, and so to have a form of racial prejudice is to be a racist, and you can't separate these things because we play these things out in the real world. And I think sometimes academics want to make these definitions, but they just don't have validity in everyday life.
But it's fair to ask the question, you can be prejudiced against people of another race group. That doesn't necessarily give you the institutional power to give effect to that prejudice.
Absolutely, but what institutional power is such an abstract thing. So you might be a professor and a head of department at a university. Your racial prejudice will manifest themselves in the way you conduct your everyday life in that department and the way you exude a power in that context. So these are very tight things to separate out, and I think sometimes it's too convenient to separate these things out.
So let's talk about South Africa in general as a country. What complicates the situation, you could argue, is that the people who now have institutional power, generally and broadly speaking, were the victims of racism themselves.
Absolutely, and there is an argument that that black people cannot be racist because they don't really have power. Well, black people have power now, and part of being a racist is to have a stereotype about another group of people that you think is inherent, and you cover the whole group with that kind of complexion. So let's take an example. Yesterday, I was listening to the news and I heard Premier David Makhura saying that Nigerians are bringing drugs to South Africa. Nigerians are drug lords, and he sort of had a wry smile that we don't want to admit it. Now, that is a form of racism. That is a form of stereotyping. That is a form of using institutional power to denigrate and create a context for a group of people when there was drugs in South Africa long before the Nigerians came here. Not every Nigerian by a long shot is a drug lord, but here's a stereotype, here's an act of prejudice, and here's a man who knows that he can be influential for people to take up that prejudice and act upon it in the streets of Johannesburg.
Let me ask you this question. Why does racism in particular against black people persist in this country?
Well, I mean, firstly, we are but a sort of captive of our upbringings. We're captive of the way society operates. We're captive of our families, our schooling, our books, and so on. We're captive of the media. And if you take all these things and reinforce them into one person's mind, you can see how prejudice becomes a normality in South Africa. People forget that that, if you take a case like Baron Stradom, before he went to shoot all those black people in Pretoria, actually put money in the parking meter. And his school told him black people were the devil. His church told him black people were the devil. His government told him black people were the devil. His rugby club told him black people were the devil. What do you do when you see the devil? It's that kind of powerful orientating influence in society that have effect on how we make up our minds about things.
Prof, I asked the question about the persistence of racism against black people to make a point. And that is, there's a very big difference between a figure like a David Makura as a premier and the kind of power that backs that office versus a Baron Stradom, and let's move it forward to today, versus a Vicky Momberg, versus an Adam Katsavelos. These are ordinary folks without the institutional power, yet can inflict the kind of damage we've seen them do, even though they are ordinary folks. You surely are not telling me that the average black South African has the same power.
I don't think the average black South African has the same power. I think, in fact, Vicky Momberg is an example of what her sense of powerlessness is. What power does she have really in society? If you look at a lot of the people who have been caught up and convicted of racism, and rightly so, many of them have not real power, both economic power and institutional power. It's a sign that they're slipping. It's a sign that they can't make sense of things. It's a sign that they automatic privilege of being white in South Africa or being Indian in South Africa can't, is no more operational.
Are you saying that if Vicky Momberg is a victim here?
Not a victim. She's reacting to a set of events that sees what she sees as her situation sliding. Remember, Vicky Momberg before didn't have to join the queue at the post office. Vicky Momberg didn't have to join the queue at the bus station. And so she's reacting to a privilege that she thinks she's an inherent right. So not a victim, but you can see how in her own mind, her privileged status is constantly being eroded. Take that to a Johan Rupert. Now here's Johan Rupert, who came on radio and exuded the most crass and basic forms of racism. But he's never going to be charged because he lives in a gated community. He flies first class in an aeroplane, and he operates in a world so far removed from the everyday confrontations that take place in South Africa. Right. So there's the big gulf between the two, and you saw both of them being caught up in what is racism. One paid a price, one didn't pay the price, and you have to ask about these class differentials that take place and how people react to them.
Professor Desai, will have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your perspective. You've heard that from the expert, the sociologist. What's your view? Our poll question on tonight's topic: can black people be racist? Green is yes, yellow maybe, red no. And of course, as I say, you can interact with our poll on sabcnews.com. You can go to Facebook and Twitter, remembering to use the hashtag SABCDG25 and hashtag SABCNews. I'll be sharing the results of the poll towards the end of the show. We'll be back with more of your views after the break.
A meteorite hit the Earth 2 million years ago, creating an enormous impact of crater, about 10 kilometers in diameter, near Vredefort in the Free State, 100 kilometers southwest of Johannesburg, now known as the Vredefort Dome, a South African World Heritage Site. The meteorite is said to have been larger than Table Mountain and caused a 1,000 megaton blast of energy. The impact would have heated about 70 cubic kilometers of rock and have increased the Earth's oxygen levels to a degree that made the development of multicellular life possible. The world has about 130 crater structures of possible impact origin. The Vredefort Dome is the largest in the world, followed by Sudbury Crater in Canada and the Chicxulub Crater in Mexico.
Get the facts first.
In 1994, ek dink was ons almal
was ek ook baie excited geweest.
For South Africa, art was never a good thing.
From a footballing point of view, there was never a separation.
Get to the truth.
There's still some serious issues in South Africa.
Maar ek dink die regering kan regtig probeer om harder te werk om
ke apartheid in Sutlile ke le ke swa ke batho ba rena ba democracy batho ba batsho iseng makgowa.
See what it all really means.
Ek is geel, want dit is die kleur in die verkeerslig wat vir jou sê wees versigtig.
I still give South Africa red.
We are somewhere in between.
We're giving our democracy a green for sure. We're very happy.
Democracy Gauge, weekdays at 5:30 on SABC News, Channel 404.
Welcome back. It's all about you here on the Democracy Gauge. So let's go straight to your views on social media. These are some of the tweets that have come through. Gaffett says they will need the whole economy, the whole economic system and resources and all the means of productions for them to be racist. Blacks, I imagine. Racism in South Africa wasn't words, it was systemic. So they'll need to have systems in place for that. Hell no, he says. T. Vasita says it depends on whether black people have the necessary institutions within a country. These have to be structured in a way that non-blacks are discriminated against. Non-blacks would lack opportunities, get exploited, etc. We can be racist, but currently no. Kusta very simply says no, it can't be. What's the picture on Facebook? This view says being a victim of racism and discrimination does not preclude one from being racist themselves. A quote there attributed to Professor Thuli Madonsela. That's an interesting perspective. And Nkosnati says being racist is learned from other people. So yes, that's one view, and we'll take one more from Facebook. Shingi says they're not perpetrators, however they can be. All right, those are the views on social media. We'll continue, of course, with the voice of the people, looking at tonight's edition of The People's View. Right, this is the segment of the show where you speak directly to us. The first view we have on our WhatsApp voice note line is from Zonwabele Zola Chayana from Pretoria, as also we're going to be hearing from Piwo Kuhle Phil Ewa from Cape Town. Let's have a look.
I'm based in Pretoria. On today's topic, whether black people can be racist, I think black people can be racist, and one of my argument is that black people actually should be racist. But this is not the dictionary definition of racism. To me, racism is about loving and supporting and promoting one's race, and therefore there's nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is the oppression of others and the prejudice that you put others through by being racist. So in a way, if one chooses to put or give positive connotations to the word racism, meaning that the love of one's race, I believe that black people should be racist.
A black person cannot be racist. There are a lot of surrounding factors that needs to be considered for one to be referred to as a racist. And racism has a lot to do with power. If you look pre-1994, during the time of the apartheid era, the white minority were racist towards other races due to the issue of power. The segregation laws and policies put them in the superior position and put them in charge of issues such as the economy. They were not affected by poverty. They were not affected by the education system as it was in their favor.
Well, if you want to be part of The People's View in our next show, send us an email to dg25@sabc.co.za. At the end of the show, I will throw forward to tomorrow's topic. Now, Ngobi Khumalo lives on the streets of Durban. His story is coming up after the break. Stay with us.
In a UN report, scientists say climate change is getting worse.
1/3 of our food sources for the population come out of the ocean.
We spoke to people who have been directly affected.
We have lost a lot of cattle. Gemsbokvlakte, Tosca gebied and Jakkalskop. Everywhere you will see there's animals dying.
I've lost 2 of my cattle this January.
Africa's demand for clean drinking water is rising.
Drinking water is a top priority.
The next day when the water comes back, it's dirty.
I have implemented a level 5 water restriction, effective immediately.
Environmentalists seek solution to preserve the planet.
This is Cape Kirpa, which is also one of the endemic species that is only found within the Western Cape, so it occurs nowhere else in the world except in our water systems.
In a UN report, scientists say climate change is getting worse.
1/3 of our food sources for the population come out of the ocean.
We spoke to people who have been directly affected.
We have lost a lot of cattle. Gemsbokvlakte, Tosca gebied and Jakkalskop. Everywhere you will see there's animals dying.
I've lost 2 of my cattle this January.
Africa's demand for clean drinking water is rising.
Drinking water is a top priority.
The next day when the water comes back, it's dirty.
I have implemented a level 5 water restriction, effective immediately.
Environmentalists seek solution to preserve the planet.
This is Cape Kirpa, which is also one of the endemic species that is only found within the Western Cape, so it occurs nowhere else in the world except in our water systems.
Well, through the Democracy Gauge, SABC News profiles South Africans from across the country. 1994, as you'll well know, was a year of change for millions of South Africans. A country once separated according to racial lines was transitioning with a promise for a better life for all. But 25 years later, tonight's featured guest is 19 years old, Ngobi Khumalo. He lives on the streets of Durban, and that's where we're going now, in KZN. And he says democracy hasn't done all that much for him. Have a look.
My name is Ngobi, my surname is Khumalo. I was raised in Waterloo, in Verulam, you know. The thing that made me end up here is drugs, heroin. I started smoking drugs when I was still young, you know. So the thing that made me end up over it's my mom, you know. My mom, she's very street, and like the way she loved me. So when she started noticing that I'm smoking drugs, she didn't know that is it me? Is it really me who's smoking drugs? So like the way she was angry, she told me that I must get out of my house and like I must come back when I stop smoking drugs. So that's why I'm staying over here. My friend of mine told me that it's something that make you feel alive, you know. It wasn't gonna make me sleep. Okay, so like I tasted it, and like when I tasted it, like it opened my heart. I started not feeling shy. I started being happy. Sometimes I don't eat. Sometimes whole day I don't have no things to sleep. I don't have no shelter. Sometimes when it's raining, I don't sleep at all because like I have to sleep while I'm standing. How can I go back to school while I'm smoking drugs? It's very hard for me. And like for me, like how I cannot go back to school without a parent, because like I need a support. I need someone who's gonna buy for me things to go to school, like every sort of things that I'm gonna wear at school. So like it's very hard for me. I go around in the taxis begging, you know, beg people. I tell them that I need money to go home, pass fair money, so they help me, because like people, you know, they have a very good heart. streets, and like the government doesn't care. It's like he doesn't care, because like you see, we people that stay in the streets, it's like we treated like dogs, you know, because like I've seen not even one person coming to us that is working for the government telling us that he have help for us, or like he need us to go to rehabs or something. There's no rehabs for us. There's no nothing, because even social workers, we go to them, but like when they see you dirty, like they don't treat you as a person. I wish he can help us very much, because like right now our life are upside down, and like he's the only person who can change this, because he's the one who's in charge of South Africa. So I wish the government can take over of us, and I wish the government can put us in his heart, and I wish he can know that we are still alive, and I wish he can know that we still have goals, because like we have a lot of goals, but like we can't achieve our goals because we're sitting on the street. So I wish like he can assess us and like try like a lot of rehabs in order for us to be okay. The reason why I'm picking up the red pedal, I'm saying this country is in danger.
Now, it's been said it's valuable to know where you come from to understand a sense of where you might be going. Today in 1994, let's take a walk down memory lane, because the SABC, as you well know, has comprehensive archives from that time. What was happening? Violence and looting had erupted in Bophuthatswana after then President Lucas Mangope attempted to crush widespread labor unrest. Let's have a look.
The state president of Bophuthatswana, Khosi Ale Mangope, announced this morning that he would be recommending to a special sitting of the Bophuthatswana Parliament on Tuesday that Bophuthatswana takes part in the upcoming general election. A political party, the Northwest Christian Democratic Party, has been registered with the IEC for participation in the forthcoming elections. President Mangope said, "I intend vigorously to lead this party in the election to demonstrate where the sympathies of the people of the Northwest Province lie. For this reason, I will on Tuesday propose to the Parliament of Bophuthatswana for participation in the upcoming election, which intention I already announced to the head committee of my party on
There it is, spokesperson for the Bophuthatswana government reading out that statement from Khosi Lucas Mangope all those years ago. Now, before we wrap, let's have a look at our poll results. This is what you have been saying. Remember, our three colors are: green is for yes, yellow is for no, red, yellow is for maybe, red is for no. I'll tell you what we'll do. The discussion has been fiery, so we'll leave the poll up for just a little bit longer for you to participate, but we'll leave it there for this evening. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch and to participate in our show. Tomorrow we're asking, do you believe we can overcome the culture of corruption in our country? That means that poll is now open. You'll choose from our standard three colors. That's going to be the poll for tomorrow. Remember, you can interact with it on sabcnews.com. That's where you'll also find information about the SABC's election coverage. sabcnews.com/elections. You can answer our questions on Facebook and Twitter, remembering to use the hashtag SABCDG25 and hashtag SABC News. You can also view all the profiles featured on today's show as well as for the past few days by visiting our website, sabcnews.com. If you want to be part of the show, you want to be part of the People's View in our next episode, send us that email, dg25@sabc.co.za. From me, Bongani Bingwa, until tomorrow, ubusuku benzolo. Good night.